Good morning. This is Pastor Becca here on this Friday morning. I hope you are having a wonderful start to your day. I want to share a word from the Lord with you from Daniel chapter 3 this morning. I've been reading through the book of Daniel in my own quiet time, and I read Daniel chapter 3 this morning. It's just this really beautiful, powerful text. So I wanted to share a few thoughts with you from it this morning. So we're going to be in Daniel chapter 3, verses 1 through 18. Daniel chapter 3, verses 1 through 18. And before we dive into the text, I want to share just a few pieces of background information to kind of set up where we are at in the story. So if you remember, Babylon comes in and overtakes the people of God. And by this point in the story, the first wave of exiles have already been taken into Babylon. And this first wave was mostly the able-bodied men, the young men who were able to work, the young men who were intelligent. So these men who could somehow serve the kingdom of Babylon in a particular way. So they've already been taken from their homeland and brought over to Babylon. And some of those people that were brought over include people like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they were all friends. And by this point in the book of Daniel, Daniel has been taken and he's been placed on the royal court. He's found favor with the king, and so he serves on the royal court, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego serve on the provincial court. And so that's where we find them today. They're in Babylon, they're in exile, and they're already serving on this provincial court. So let's hear the word of the Lord. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and people of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into the blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold that you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your Majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." And this is the word of the Lord for us this morning. Thanks be to God. Here in our text, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego find themselves in this really difficult spot. They truly find themselves between a rock and a hard place. They find themselves in this life or death situation. You see, King Nebuchadnezzar has set up this golden image, and he has set this edict that when the music plays, people of all nations, people of all languages, are to bow down and to worship him and to worship this golden image that he has put up. And whoever does not will face the blazing furnace. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego find themselves in this difficult place because as the people of God, they have committed themselves to worshiping one God, Yahweh. And they can bow down and worship no other God, not even in this place of exile. It's truly a difficult situation that they find themselves in. It is a life or death situation. They either bow down and worship this golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has put up, and they are able to preserve their lives. They are able to keep their high favored positions in the provincial court. Life can go on as normal, or they face death. They face this blazing furnace. Those are their two choices here. And one thing we quickly learn about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is they have tremendous faith. Even in the midst of this life or death decision, they are fully committed to worshiping their God alone. Hear their response one more time to King Nebuchadnezzar. They say, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." It's a powerful response to King Nebuchadnezzar. We can only imagine the fear that they must have been experiencing as they're called before the king, and they know that their life may not exist beyond this day, and yet they respond with such faith even in this moment. But perhaps the most powerful part of their response for me is that last part. They believe that God is able to deliver them. But then they say this, "But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not worship your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up." Even if he does not. That is incredible faith. That is sanctified faith. To trust God so much that even if God does not answer your prayers in the ways that you hope God will, even if God does not act in the ways that you expect God to, that even in those moments, even if the worst comes, you are going to worship God alone. You are going to put your faith and your trust and your hope in God alone. It is incredible faith. And I think it's a wonderful example for us as the people of God today. One of my favorite movies growing up was the movie of Aladdin. I absolutely loved Aladdin. And my favorite character in Aladdin was the genie. Robin Williams did such a fantastic job of playing the genie. And I always thought it was so neat that you could just rub this magic lamp and this genie would appear and offer you 3 wishes. And sometimes I think that's how our prayer life becomes with God, whether we intend it to be or not. Sometimes we begin to treat God as if God is that genie. And when we find ourselves in trouble or we find ourselves needing something from God, we rub that magic lamp, we dust it off the shelf, we pull it out, we rub that magic lamp, and we expect God to suddenly appear and to do our beckoning, whatever that might be, to answer our prayers in exactly the ways that we want God to. But here we see a very different example from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They don't treat God as if God is some genie that's only purpose is to do their bidding as they see fit. Instead, they see themselves as servants of God who are going to worship God alone no matter how God acts. Whether God fulfills their plans or not, whether God answers their prayers in the ways they hope God will or not, no matter what happens, They are going to worship this God alone. They are going to trust in the plans of this God. And they are going to lay down their lives, if need be, in service to this God. It is this incredible faith. It's perhaps the most sanctified type of prayer to pray those words, even if God does not. There's been things that I've prayed for in my life, and adding those words on at the end, even if God does not, it's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard to trust that God knows what is best, even when it makes no sense to us. It is really hard to think about God answering our prayers in ways differently than we hope or expect God to. And yet my prayer for us this morning is that we might have the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And even in those moments when we are facing really difficult situations, that we might have the faith to pray those words, even if God does not. Even if God does not, I am still going to worship him. Even if God does not answer this prayer in the way that I hope, I am still going to trust him. Even if God does not work in the ways that I expect, I am still going to follow him alone. It is this powerful prayer. It is this sanctified commitment saying, God, I am all yours no matter what. No matter what. It's incredible faith. And my prayer for us this morning is that we might be able to embody that same type of faith as well. And so here is my practice for you today. I know many of you already have prayer lists that you have written down, that you pray every single day. You are so faithful in prayer, and I am so thankful for that. I want you to get out those prayer lists, and I want you to begin practicing praying these words at the end of each of those requests, even if God does not. And spend some time in prayer, just surrendering these requests before God, some of these requests that are very, very dear to our hearts. And surrender these requests before God and pray, and praying this prayer of submission, this prayer of surrender, saying, no matter what happens, God, no matter how you answer these prayers or don't answer these prayers in the ways that I see fit, no matter what, I am going to trust in you. No matter what, I am going to worship you alone. Friends, may the peace of Christ be with you. May you sense the presence of God in your life in a very real way today. And may you find a position of surrender as we submit ourselves fully to God's plans and trust in him alone. Blessings.